This reading is called The Redeeming Light. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The Bhagavad Gita says in the 10th chapter, I am the source of everything. From me all creation emerges. Blessed with this realization, the wise, awe-stricken, adore me. What is this light of which so many scriptures speak? In Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, we read an early experience that Master had with the light. He wrote in the autobiography, I was blessed about the age of 8 with a wonderful healing through the photograph of Lahiri Mahashaya. Here's Lahiri Mahashaya. This experience gave intensification to my divine love. While at our family estate in Bengal, I was stricken with Asiatic cholera. My life was despaired of. The doctor could do nothing. At my bedside, Mother frantically motioned me to look at Lahiri Mahashaya's picture on the wall above my head. Bow to him mentally. She knew I was too feeble even to lift my hands in salutation. If you really show your devotion and inwardly kneel before him, your life will be spared. I gazed at his photograph and saw there a blinding light enveloping my body and the entire room. My nausea and other uncontrollable symptoms disappeared. I was well. At once I felt strong enough to bend over and touch Mother's feet in appreciation of her immeasurable faith in her Guru. Mother pressed her head repeatedly against the little picture. O omnipresent Master, I thank thee that thy light hath healed my son. I realized that she too had witnessed the luminous blaze through which I had instantly recovered from a usually fatal disease. Where my light is, God once told a saint whom the divine light had healed, no darkness can dwell. The divine light, pure, calm, liberating, is the only final cure for every kind of delusion, ill health, emotional grief, and spiritual ignorance. Seek it daily in the silence, in deep meditation. As the book of Isaiah in the Bible says, the people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them hath the light shined. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
I'd like to begin with a reading from Whispers from Eternity by Paramahansa Yogananda. This poem is titled, Teach us to consider no work more important than thy work. O Spirit, as no work is possible without borrowing from thee the power to perform it, so teach us to consider no work greater than thy spiritual work. Teach us to feel that since no duty is possible without thee, so no duty is more important than our duty to thee. And teach us to love thee above everything, for we cannot live or love anything or anybody without thy life and thy love. It's wonderful to see you all and to be here with you today. I just returned from Pune on Friday evening. We have a Kriya Bond retreat there, which is we do annually. People from all over India gather together at our retreat center in Pune and practice Kriya together, go into talks on Kriya and so on. And so it's a wonderful thing to do, and it was a wonderful thing to be a part of, but we also have a very big weekend here. And so I came back for that. But if some friends you see are missing, it's because they're over there. And it's a nice gathering. Dhyanaji is there, Jayaji is there, and Nayaswami Devarshi is also there for this retreat. And also this Sunday, in fact, I guess that's today, this afternoon, the Pune Center is dedicating a new space. The city center that they have in that city is expanding, and so they're getting a larger commercial space on the main road. As they said, that's always full of traffic that moves very slowly, which is great because then people have to look up at the yoga and see the signs and so on. And so it's on the second floor. It's a very nice space, good energy, and they're running frantically. I visited it, and there was scraps of wood here and there, and people were laying something all over the door, to give it a nice laminate. And I thought, oh, brings back memories of this place, and having to watch your step and not step on a nail right before the dedication. Again, it was our recent past here in getting this center ready. And so it's always a joy when we see the work expanding, God's work expanding, not in a sense of conquest or a sense of colonization or opening up, one more Saravan Bhavan outlet or something like that. It's not that. But that more souls can be reached. More souls seeking God, more souls seeking peace can be reached, can find a place. We had a level 1 class yesterday, and it was so nice to hear from the students sharing, saying, why did you come? I would like inner peace. It just touches the heart, because we all know what that hunger for inner peace is. We all remember how we felt when we came, first to Ananda, for example, when we started meditating, and we also have noticed how, I hope, we have found some of what we are seeking, or at least we have found the path, we have found the right direction to move in. As one friend of ours said, and it was very sweet, and I always remember it, I have grown in ways now, she said, that I always wanted to grow. I always knew these were the things I had to grow in. But until I started meditating, I just couldn't. I might try here and there, one step forward, one step back. Since I've been meditating, I've been growing in those ways automatically. And I really appreciated what she shared, because that was something I too found true, and I've heard it from many people, that one thing meditation does is it helps us to tune into that redeeming light, that divine light that propels us forward. Not with great effort, not with great self-control, like I want to overcome anger, and so since I've started meditating now, I just never let my anger out on people. I'm very self-controlled now. It's not like that. It's not that we stitch our lips shut so we won't explode. It's that we just don't feel like exploding, at least as much or as largely as before. That, it's okay, it's all right, never mind, and so on. And so we find that that light, by letting it into our lives, whether we see it or not, we feel it. We feel that, again, the light was referred to in the reading as that which helped to heal Master when he was a young boy. And of course he saw that light. But again, whether we see it or not, we feel its effects and we see the results in our lives. We see how we change. Swamiji said, just see how people practicing Hong Sa, even after a week, how they change. We see it here. From people who attend level 1 and they come 7 days later to level 2, you can see the change. And moreover, they speak of the changes they have experienced in just a short amount of time. But Swamiji also said, see how people who come to Ananda, how they, at the village, for example, or at a center, just see how the light grows in their eyes. Because, of course, it's not just our own self-effort, it's also opening to that divine light. There was a very nice story that we heard recently of someone who was protected by the divine light. This was a member at Ananda Village. Her name is Catherine Kairavi. And if those of you who know the book 2 Souls, 4 Lives, which is one of our books out there, it's the story of a past life of Master Yoganandaji and also of Swami Kriyanandaji. Yoganandaji was William the Conqueror. This was in about the 1050, 1060, this time in England and France. And his son Henry, who was a king of England also, just like William was Swamiji. So she researched and wrote this book, not only telling the story of those men's lives in the past, but also drawing connections with their lives now. So it's a very fascinating book. Anything on a study of reincarnation where we have a master to tell us that he was this or you were that is very helpful. It's not always helpful if there is a psychic telling us, as one woman came to Yoganandaji and she said, in my previous lives I was Mary, Queen of Scots. And so he said, oh, very good. And how do you know? I was told by a psychic. So, okay, fine. So then a few days later another woman came to him and she said, in my last life I was Mary, Queen of Scots. And so my master said, oh, yeah, okay. So then he called the two of them together and he said, so, which one is it? And she had gone to the same psychic also. So we can't always rely on intuitions or things like that. But if a master tells us, gives us the story, then we can build on that and then deepen our understanding. So Catherine, who wrote this book, was turning into Ananda village, the driveway, and there was another car zooming at top speed, and she didn't even see the car, it was coming so fast. And as she turned, she hit the car. She said, the car hit her. She said, all I realized was I saw the front of the car. I mean, that was the only warning she had, was that suddenly there was the front of the car. She said, the thought that went through my mind was, this may be it. And her car was thrown backwards down, in other words, she was turning this way, it was thrown backwards and then down a ravine and came to rest at the bottom of this basically hill. And she realized when she was when she came to, or whatever it is after the shock, that okay, I can move my toes, I can move my knees. She found every part more or less seemed to move, and there was no blood everywhere. There were a few scratches, but she was okay. She tried to get up and she found she could. The car was in bad shape, but she was able to get the door open and get out of the car. And then she realized what shape is the other car in. And she started to climb her way back up to the road, just feeling terrified that she was going to find perhaps a dead young man at the wheel of the other car. And so she made it to the top of the hill and found nothing. No car, no person, a bunch of broken pieces of her car, but nothing else. And so she, began to wonder, what is happening? Am I dreaming? Like, what's going on? And she said there was just 5 minutes where she stood there. No cars came by, and she was sort of wondering about this whole situation. Then finally a car came and a man got out. And he said, are you okay? And, was there an accident? And, what happened? And she said, well, I was turning in and my car got hit and it's down there. And he said, you were turning into Ananda village? Do you live here? And she said, yeah. And he said, I just read Autobiography of a Yogi. It's fascinating. And this Kriya Yoga is really basically. And she said, oh yeah, very good, But still, there was something else on her mind at the moment. And after talking to her for a little bit, he said, well, let me go check your car. And so he went down, and when he came back, he was quite serious. And he said, your steering column of your car is snapped, and your car is totaled. And she said she felt that it was occurring to him that she should not have been able to have just walked away from that car, and that she shouldn't perhaps even be able to be standing right there in front of him. Meanwhile, what happened to the other car? It had hit her, it had obviously a very dangerous accident, and it had left. And so, I don't know how you feel about that in America, but in India. In America, that is frowned upon, as I'm sure it is here. You cannot leave the scene of an accident, and this car had.
It's against the law.
Yes, very much against the law, and it's just not done. But it was done by this driver. And then another car came up, and he said, just passed another car a few minutes ago, and it was all like broken and falling apart as it was driving. And I happened to have my camera on my dashboard and just happened to record it as it went by. And so when the police came, they examined this camera footage and they saw, okay, there's the car and there's the license plate number. And they got the license plate number, they looked up the fellow, and one cop stayed with Catherine and one police officer went to the man's house, knock, 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 and there he was. And it turned out he had not a valid driver's license, he didn't have a valid car registration, and he had left the scene of a crime, so he wasn't doing very well with the legal system. And I mention that not because, justice should be served, but quite frankly, it's better for him to have that karma over and done with, rather than, be in his next life and then suddenly out of the blue, he's arrested for something he didn't do, and then kind of said, hey, but that's not fair. And God says, well, that's when I didn't catch you in the last life, so I'm catching you now. It's better to just get it over with now. And again, thank God he was okay. Thank God she was okay. But she said that another interesting aspect of this experience for her was that this astrological bangle, which many of us wear, Swami Sri Yukteswarji created this bangle sort of formula. And so Master writes about it in Autobiography of a Yogi. She had given her bangle for cleaning. It's good to get these bangles clean from time to time. And she did it very consciously. She said, I'm in the energy of Swamiji's birthday weekend. It was Swamiji's birthday, May 19th, that this had happened. And so she didn't just, casually give away her bangle. She said, I'm going to have it cleaned. The energy of Swamiji's birthday will protect me. And very interestingly, she said that the only scratches she got on her body were right on her wrist where the bangle would have been. And so it just really makes you wonder about this world that we live in, because we can be bathed in a sea of God's light. We may not see it, but we saw the results in the fact that she was protected. And it isn't just God's special grace that, he loves yogis and kriyabans especially, and so he protects them to keep them going. It's not just that, because of course there are devotees on all spiritual paths and many lovers of God everywhere. But one thing also that your yoga practice, your meditation, and Kriya Yoga especially helps you to do is to raise the energy in the spine, increase the flow of energy that not only clears away blocks to that flow, it clears away karmas, it helps the karmas to be reduced. There's a whole way in which that happens in terms of burning up the vrittis and the chakras, if that makes sense. But also, what it does by raising our energy is as with a wire, that if there's a greater current of electricity, there's a greater magnetic field. So the same with us. As our spinal energy flow increases, our magnetic field increases, which is our aura. And that magnetic field you can think of as perhaps not visible to you, but it is a protection around you. Sometimes you'll see that little kids will draw people when they're first starting out to draw, and you know how sometimes they'll draw people without any arms, or they'll just give one leg or something, and it's good to encourage them, and eventually the other leg will show up in time. But there was a number of cases, and I know of one in particular, where a little girl was just always drawing colors around people too, because that's how she saw them. And so she would draw this color around this person, and someone would say, oh, that's sweet, honey, why did you choose that color? And she said, that is the color. This one has a blue in her aura, so I drew the blue. And she did this not knowing that this experience was not shared by others until someone said to her, little kid, saying, what are you doing that for? There's no colors around people. And so then she stopped. And then she not only stopped drawing them, but she stopped seeing them. And so it's important to realize that sometimes children have access still to their recent memories of the astral world, and we should encourage them. And yes, relating to the world in a way that others can relate to, but also be true to their own experience. There was a mother at Ananda Village who had a son who was very active and kind of rough and tumble and so on. And then she had another baby, and when the baby came home, the son said, "I want to be with the baby alone." And the mom said, "Okay." So she let him into the baby's room, but she kept the door cracked a little bit just to see what was going to happen here. And the little boy went up to his little baby sibling, I forget the gender, and said, "Remind me of what it's like, because I'm starting to forget." And so many of us may have forgotten those earlyhood memories. Swamiji writes about it in The New Path, that he was very used to, as he would fall asleep, see all kinds of beautiful colors and would just feel himself bathed in these rainbow astral lights. And it was very natural for him. And he didn't think anything of it. In fact, it was very comforting, but he didn't think it was odd. But later in life, meaning when he was still young, I think he may have been 9 or so, he contracted a disease that gave him fever and delirium and so on. And he was in his fever just completely in an altered state, basically, because of that delirium again. And so he then became, after that experience, he found it so unpleasant that he thought anything that's not normal, he didn't want to go near for fear of sort of getting back into that kind of discomfort. And so even these lights, they were not normal, and so he sort of forced them away, and in time they stopped coming. Now, of course, these were, in his case, we know, also very spiritual memories and connections or experiences. And these are sometimes given to us early on in life to remind us that not only that's where we came from, but that's where we're going. Often it will happen when you start meditating, when you come back on this, when you come to the spiritual path, but really it is coming back onto the spiritual path. You start to remember, you may remember certain experiences from childhood that you might have forgotten, or certain feelings that you had from childhood that return to you suddenly, and it may be in the same way. A friend of mine for years remembered how there was a time when she was very upset as a little girl, and her sister came into her room that night and just comforted her. And she felt so grateful that in the middle of this difficult, I think it was a difficult family situation, that her sister, who wasn't always all that nice, was in that moment very nice, very loving, her older sister, very supportive of her. And years later, she thanked her sister for being so kind to her in that moment. And her sister said, "What are you talking about? You know, when you came into my room that night and sat on my bed and all that." And she said, "I never did that. I didn't even know what you're talking about." You know, probably even said, "Shut up." No, who knows? In other words, it wasn't coming from the sister, it wasn't that sister. And so these experiences, though we either forget or we may even reframe them in a way that makes sense to our mind's logic. Of course it was my sister, who else would it be? But yet, it's God or our soul or our guru reaching out to us. Sometimes, even before we get onto the spiritual path, we hear the voice of, this was an experience I had growing up when I was in a really bad mood about something, and just because life was just awful and miserable and so unfair, and I would hear a little voice saying, "Well, but, you know, there's some positives to it too." "No, there's no positives." "Well, after all, you have some friends you can talk to." "Yeah, I guess so." And so, against my will, because I was committed to being in a bad mood, still, there was this little voice saying, "Why not cheer up? Why not look on the other side of it too?" And as I started to meditate, I started to remember, yes, even then, because I didn't always have that voice coming from me externally, coming to me externally, calming, encouraging, strengthening advice, I was not always surrounded by. But internally, it would come. And so I thought, maybe that was Master. I like to think that. Maybe it was my soul. Who knows? But it was something trying to urge me to cheer up. That's what the one line I love, one of the lines I love the most in that song. "Be strong in your courage when others despair." And I sometimes will say that to myself in a difficult situation, because it doesn't matter. Everybody else is despairing, right? I'm strong in my courage. It's not that. It's when I am in despair, too. And then I think, I am in despair. It's quite reasonable to be in despair, but be strong in your courage when others despair. You can even apply that to our own thoughts. That let this thought be strong in courage when the other thoughts are despairing. Come on now. And the way Swamiji sings it and the music itself gives us that strength, gives us that courage to say, I think everything may be all right in the end. Again, let me cling to that divine light. Let me know that it's there. Again, whether it's seen or not is secondary. We see the results in our lives. Ways that we can tune into that light, as I already mentioned, meditation is extremely helpful in that way. What it does is make us still enough, calm enough to notice the light that's already there. That's what it is. It isn't necessarily that we're drawing the light. It isn't that we're clearing away cobwebs trying to find this hidden light. It's there. But, we're walking around saying, where's the light? I don't see any light. This stupid light, I don't see why it comes to me. And Master's just saying, just try this. Open an eye. It's much easier to see the light when our eyes are open. But again, some of us see light, some of us hear sound, some of us feel. Some of us don't have any of those experiences, and yet we change. As another friend of mine said, is something I've always enjoyed and repeat often. When asked, why are you coming now to this level 3 class? And he said, I enjoy, so I continue. And I just thought that should be the motto of the devotee on the spiritual path. It isn't just for purification. It isn't just so that we can grow spiritually or burn our karmas. It is a path of joy. And so we ought to be saying, I enjoy, so I continue. That's really the explanation for why to seek God. When someone asked Swamiji once, in a very sort of haughty tone, I believe, I didn't hear the question, but I heard the answer, what is the mission of Ananda? And Swamiji said, to have fun. And then he said, of course, you can understand what I mean when I say to have fun, but that's really the point. Someone else also asked him, Swamiji, how can we convince others to live a more moral life? And Swamiji said, the only reason for living a higher morality is that it makes you happy. It's enjoyable to live such a life. That should be our only reason, and that should be the only reason we offer it to others, as opposed to follow the shining examples of the saints and myself. That's very frail. We can't even control our own thoughts half the time. And the more we rigidly try to put on a show that this is the way I am, the more brittle it gets. Better to use God's energy, better to be a channel for the divine light yourself. Again, it's not just that it comes to us, but we should also be like windows that let that light through. As someone, when we do healing prayers, sometimes people in the level 1 class will say, but we have just meditated and gotten all this energy, and so now why are we all wasting it on someone else? And so the teaching of Masters comes to mind. The channel is blessed by that which flows through it. Which flows through it. The energy is one thing in life that the more you give away of it, the more you have. The more that flows through you, the more you are energized. It's a moving, living reality. It isn't something that's hoarded and finite, and as if the more you give, the less you have. Even in life, even with money, we see that. If people view money as a flow, then it flows more abundantly. But if it's frozen and stuck, then that flow stagnates. And so it's very helpful to share your energy. It's very helpful as you give, so you open yourself up to receive more. If we think of water flowing through a hose to water the garden, the goal is to water the garden, but still that water flowing through the hose cleans the inside of the hose too. And so when we send that divine energy, its flow through us is very healing to us too. Someone did a study at a shrine, this was in Lourdes in France, where Saint Bernadette had been, and it's a very beautiful story, her life. It came out in movie form in the 50s, and Master said he went to see that film over and over again. He was relating to it very deeply, of the time when she has the divine vision, when she merges with God, the kind of sufferings that she goes through also. It's a very inspiring story, and we've watched the movie here with friends before, and it may be time to see it again sometime soon. But someone wanted to, because many healings had taken place. There is a shrine and there is water there that has a whole miraculous origin. So people go there for healings also, and many people have been healed physically. And so a professor sent a questionnaire to anyone who claimed that he could find, that claimed that they had been healed. And he asked them so many questions, trying to find out, okay, what day was it, and what did you eat beforehand, and seeing if he could find some statistical piece that he could correlate. He said one question that almost everybody answered the same was, what were you doing at the time of the healing? And the answer was, I was praying for someone else. And so remember that. The channel is blessed by that which flows through it. And so as we share of that light, as we as we act as windows, transmitting stations for that light, then we also grow in that light. I mean, that's really what the goal of the spiritual path is too, not just to keep all of it for ourselves. And of course it's natural. If you found something that's made your life so happy, why wouldn't you want to share it with everyone? I mean, if you find a new dosa place, don't tell anyone. I want to go there and not have any noise and disturbance around me and have all the idli and chutney and dosa for myself. No, hey, you should come, it's really good. And so similarly, I don't think similarly to the dosa place, but along this line of the window, Swamiji had an experience that when he was, as a monk, he had an office and he had a big picture window in front of his desk that looked out into the garden. And he would, at times when writing or working on things, he would look out the window occasionally and rest his mind and get inspired by the beauty there. And then there was a huge rainstorm, as I'm sure you can well imagine. Think back to last night, and especially the night before. And that rainstorm splashed mud all over the window to the point where he could no longer see through it. It was just mud. And so he thought to himself, I better go out and clean it. And as he said, being preoccupied with other things, he got around to cleaning it about 2 weeks later. So meanwhile, he had to live with this 2 weeks of just this smeared window. And when he finally did clean it, and then he came back to his office and he looked through it, he said, what a beautiful window. And then he laughed because he said, it isn't the window itself that's beautiful. I didn't like it because I could see it. I liked it because I could see through it. And he has explained at other times that this is also a beautiful illustration for us as to why we love the Masters so much. It isn't for they themselves that we love them, but it's for what flows through them. Yoganandaji, when people would say, aren't these your disciples? He'd say they're God's disciples. God is the Guru. It's God coming through me. Someone asked Lahiri Mahashaya, can you please heal? Actually, it was the disciple himself who was blind from birth. And one of his fellow disciples said, you ask the Guru to heal you. Ask the Guru to heal you. And so finally the disciple, this is an autobiography of a yogi, sort of cautiously approached Lahiri Mahashaya and said, can you please heal me? And Lahiri Mahashaya said, how? I have no healing power. Someone has contrived to put me in a difficult situation or an embarrassing spot. How can I heal you? And then the disciple said, God who you are one with, God whose infinite power flows through you, can surely heal me. And Lahiri Mahashaya said, that is a different point altogether. Of course. And so then the story goes on to how he was able to heal that disciple in a very miraculous way. So, remember that. Someone said to Swamiji, we love you so much. And he said, really, what you love is not me, but what you see in me, or what you see coming through me. And he said, furthermore, really what you see is your own self. And isn't that true? How truth is something that we're not taught, but something that we recognize. Somebody gives a teaching, and we don't just say, okay, so you're saying that we should seek love. Okay, I better write this down. We should seek love. No, our hearts seek love automatically, but we recognize that truth. It's something in us that then when it's stated or is put with clarity, yes, I know that's true. In fact, Patanjali defines the whole of the spiritual path, the whole of spiritual awakening as what? Learning, as passing that 12th standard exam? No, nothing like that. It is smriti, he says, memory. We simply remember that that is our own true nature. We recognize, but this is who I am. And as you meditate more and more, you start to find that hey, it's not that I'm becoming someone else, but this is who I always have been, or who I've always wanted to be. This is who I am when I have a good day, when everything is fine, when the vadas are perfectly crispy and there's no traffic and the weather is cool, and then I get to office and the boss says, why not just take a holiday? Then I get to act like my true self. But you know, that happens rarely in life. But when we meditate, it starts to happen all the time. So even if there's rain and burnt cold vadas and all kinds of other things, and two bosses, we can manage and say, that's all right, I feel that joy inside. And again, what you feel, what you have drawn of God into your life, share it with others. God bless you.